Hello, everyone. Welcome to Joiner English's ACT Prep Steps to Success. I'm Samuel Chang, here recording for Joiner English, and today is our first day of ACT strategy lessons. And today is day 2, as you can see from my slide here, English Strategy Lesson 1. So today we're going to be going over a grammar cheat sheet for the SAT and the ACT, and we're going to be going over half of a complete list of ACT grammar and punctuation rules. And in strategy lesson 2 tomorrow, we're going to be going over the rest of the complete ACT lessons, or the complete ACT grammar rules, and so that gives us a complete overview of everything you need to know to succeed on the ACT English. One thing I want to mention is in days 7 and 8, which are reading strategy lessons 1 and 2, I am going over the diagnostic test in full, but that's because that's the best way to review for the ACT reading test, is to take you through a lot of questions so you can kind of see the way I think. But that's not the best way for the English test, because I've done that before. I've gone over English questions with students, like whole tests on end, and it hasn't helped very much, because I find that the better way to go through English is to make sure you have in your mind a solid, memory of rules of the English language, so that you know what to choose when the time comes. Most of English's questions are easy if you know the rule associated with it. They're just testing if you know the rule. And there are quite a few questions that are easy, like just, reading it. You can tell one's wrong and the other's right. But the other, of course, questions, you have to know some of the more specific rules and regulations in the English language. So today we're going to go ahead and get started with a grammar cheat sheet for the SAT and ACT. I hope you went over your diagnostic exam. If you haven't done that yet, I suggest you pause the video right here and go back over the diagnostic exam and the answers you got wrong, and even the answers you got right, or the questions you got right. Going over those never hurts. So definitely go over that before you watch this video, because you kind of need to know a few of the examples that I'm going to be going over, and you kind of need to have a bit of experience behind you. So I suggest you pause the video and go over that if you haven't done so, or if you even haven't taken the exam yet, please do that. Only give yourself the allotted amount of time, of course. So, of course, like I said, in the reading, we're going through the whole diagnostic exam, but in this English, I'm not even going to mention the diagnostic exam during the strategy lessons, because that's for your own, that's for your own, experience. Doing a lot of practice exams will help you, but it won't necessarily help, us in our kind of, strategy talk, because each of the questions has its own rule. So, like I said, I'm going to start going over this cheat sheet right here. Let me go ahead and switch my share right here, and we will go ahead and get started. So, excuse me, as you see, the grammar cheat sheet for the SAT and ACT is in front of me, and we're going to be focusing, of course, on the ACT here. And we're going to be focusing on the ACT because, that's the test that we use widely in Kentucky. There are other states that use the SAT a lot, but we'll focus on the ACT because this session is on the ACT. And I've taken both exams, and I can truthfully tell you the ACT is number 1 easier, and number 2 it's easier to get a better score because there's fewer numbers. So a perfect score is a lot easier to get than, so to speak, a perfect score on the SAT. So I do suggest you take the ACT. And also you can take both like I did, but one is enough for anybody in my opinion. So let's go ahead and get started on this grammar cheat sheet. So shorter is better. That's the I find it interesting that that's the number 1 point on here. And the reason I find it interesting is because it's been the number 1 point on every single review book. And it's the number 1 point I was going to mention to you today as well. So when I was thinking and preparing for this lesson, I was basically, the first thought that came into my mind is I have to mention that shorter is better. So concision is something that is super, super important on the ACT. And the reason it's listed first on this cheat sheet and in every other review book for the ACT is because there are times when there are more than one answer choice that is correct. And you have to choose the shorter one, or the one that's more concise and accurate, right? There are some times that, there's 4 answer choices, and you'll find that 2 of them are wrong, and the other 2 are both right. Or one of them is wrong, and the other 3 are all right. You'll have to find, the one that's both correct and the one that's concise and short. So this is the most important, in my opinion. So I'm going to label that as most important right here. So if shorter is better is most important, does it mean that I just choose a shorter one and move on? Well, of course not. It means that shorter is better. All of these tips right here are, after, you check the validity of the answer choice. So if it's valid according to English principles, which is what we're going to go over in this packet that I'm going to go over in a little while. All the English rules and principles you need to know. Of course, shorter is better only applies if the answer choice is correct in the first place. So that is the most important thing. But shorter is better is probably, it'll probably show up in at least 15 out of the 75 questions. So that's huge for a single strategy point. So that's why I mention it most right here. Underline not and accept. And you've heard this for all exams, right? And this is not just for the ACT right here. This is for every single exam you'll ever take, for any teacher or any standardized exam, like AP exams. All exams, you're going to underline not and accept, right? Because, frankly, that's, the determinant of the answer. If you don't underline these, you're screwed, yeah. So don't do that. Always underline your nots and accepts, or at least, keep that in the forefront of your mind as you're answering a question. Check, delete, omit first. So there are ACT questions you might have seen throughout your diagnostic exam, and this is a reason why I wanted you to do the diagnostic exam first, so that you'll kind of know, what occurrences of each of these look like. So there are questions that there will be one delete and omit answer choice. And you always need to check that answer choice first, because there is a higher likelihood that answer choice is going to be correct. So there is more than 25% chance for this answer choice to be correct, okay? So you always check it first. There are obviously many, many occurrences where it's wrong and it's maybe even trying to trick you, but always check it first because it's right more than a fourth of the time. And, of course, if you don't know the answer to that question, like you're just completely confused, then choosing, the delete, omit answer choice will give you a better chance of getting the question right. Period equals semicolon equals comma and but. So this means, of course, separating 2 independent clauses, right? You see the common and but and the and. We'll get into this as well later on, but these are just a brief overview of the most important points. We'll get into the details later. But remember, the and but is a coordinating conjunction. So you'll be looking at, the comma and the and but as, a separator for 2 independent clauses. And that can also be a semicolon. You can just put a semicolon there and move on to the next clause. And a period, of course, works. You know that. So they're all equal. Comma plus she, it, they is usually a comma splice, and it's usually wrong. So if you look at, a typical comma splice is where you put, a comma, but not an and but. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't see this, can you? Okay. A comma splice is where you put a comma without an and but, and you just move on with life. And that's a comma splice, and it's wrong. And comma splices, the reason why they're usually followed with she, he, it, or they, usually, stuff like that. The reason why it's always, or usually, followed by that is because those are subjects, right? It's starting the next sentence, so, or the next clause. Because if you start a next clause without an and but with a comma, you're automatically wrong if they're both independent clauses, right? So always be on the lookout for that. It's there as possessive, right? And then it's, comma, s equals it is. There, they, comma, re equals they are, and there equals place, right? So this is talking about, of course, homonym, or homophones, So you'll see that it's right here, and it's is especially confused. So these 2 it's, right? It without the apostrophe is possessive. The reason it's so confusing is because usually possessive pronouns have possessive words, or it doesn't have to be a pronoun, but usually possessive words have a comma s, right? But no, it without a comma s is possessive, whereas it with a comma s is, an abbreviation there. Their, T-H-E-I-R, is possessive, right? It's talking about, if I say it's their ball, it means the ball belongs to them. Whereas their, T-H-E-Y, apostrophe R-E, is they are. That's an abbreviation there. And then you'll see there, T-H-E-R-E, is a place, right? If I'm saying you're there, you're in a specific place. Do not get your homophones mixed up. 2 commas, 2 dashes, 2 parentheses, okay? This is talking about appositive phrases. And if you know what appositive phrases are, then you know that appositive phrases are, the difference between phrases and clauses, of course, is a phrase is an incomplete idea, whereas a clause is a complete idea, right? And appositive phrases are obviously incomplete ideas, but notice that they're enclosed in commas, dashes, or parentheses because they're kind of an interruption to the rest of the sentence. If I say, I'm going to the park, which is next to the beach, then I'll go home. Which is next to the beach is my appositive phrase because it's interrupting, the main flow of the sentence. So that can be surrounded by commas, dashes, or parentheses and still be correct. If you surround it with semicolons, that's incorrect, etc. Let's go to the top of the list again. List items must be parallel. So if you have, this is one of the big ones on the ACT. Sometimes they try to trick you with a list, but the first 2 items are nouns, and the third item moves on to the rest of the clause. As like, it could be, I don't know, another subject or something. So sometimes they do that, having 2, parallel list items, and then the third one moves on with the flow of the sentence, and you just don't, catch up on it. It could just be, one word, but it moves on with the rest of the sentence, and it's not supposed to be there. So always check your list items, especially if you have it underlined and you're answering a question over a list. Check your list items are, all the same. They all could fill in the same place in a sentence. Like, for example, noun, noun, noun there. A comma before a preposition is always wrong. So sometimes they try to put a comma before a preposition as, kind of a stop, but that's not, and there's nothing supporting that in the English language. That's all I can say about that. If you have a comma before a preposition, it's wrong. And you know what prepositions are, through, behind, stuff like that. Colon equals list or explanation must follow a full sentence. So you cannot put a comma in the middle of 2 clauses, for example. That's not a good separation. Your comma always needs to come before a list or an explanation of the thing that came before the comma. If you're saying, well, these are my favorite snacks, and then you put a colon, you list your favorite snacks, that's perfect. But if you put a incomplete sentence before the colon and expect to finish it after the colon, that's wrong. No matter, you could be even listing stuff after the colon and then continue with your sentence, that's still wrong. Keep verb tense consistent. So your verb tense is, past, present, future, past perfect, present perfect, future perfect, right? Those are your verb tenses, right? There's 6 of them. And you always want to keep them consistent. Why? Because you cannot start a sentence in past tense and end it with future tense or present tense. That doesn't work that way. That's wrong according to the ACT. Singular verbs end in S. Plural verbs do not. These are the opposite of nouns, right? Remember, singular nouns don't end with S. Like you could say boot is 1 boot, right? And boots is 2 boots or more than 2 boots, right? So, but singular verbs, the verb without an S always comes with a noun with an S, right? So if I say, what could I say? The cat walks in the storm. But I don't say the cats walks in the storm, right? I say the cats walk in the storm, or the cats walk in the storm, or the cat walks, right? There's only an S on one of them. So you have to know singular verbs end in S. Plural verbs do not. And then Second to last here is the than equals comparison and then equals next. So don't get those two confused again. Those are often confused. They're not exactly homonyms or homophones, but they are commonly confused there. Always know that you only have than if you're comparing something. This is greater than that. This is better than that. Whereas then means next. You might have it as a transition, right? I'm going to the park, then I'm going to the movies. So never get those confused. Add, delete, revise. Is this information on or off topic? So if they're asking you, sometimes questions, there's only going to be, either add or delete in one question. There's not going to be both of them. But sometimes the question asks, well, is it good to add one element? Or is it good to delete one element? So it's always better. And I said here, you check, delete, omit first. And the same goes for add, right? If there's a thing to add, it usually won't be that you have to check it first, because it's usually asking you which is better to add. But just know, add, delete, revise, always ask yourself, is the information on topic or off topic? If it's off topic, it's unnecessary information. And due to shorter is better, you never include unnecessary information. So you always delete the unnecessary information and you never add it, right? And revise is usually right if you need that information, but it's just not written in the correct way, right? And you always want your information to be written in the correct way and be necessary. So here, let's go ahead and start going over the complete ACT grammar and punctuation rules. Let me zoom in a little bit on this page right here, so you can see better. And I will post both of these, not annotated, but just hopefully, I think I'll post them blank on the web page below this video, so you can take a look at those. We're only going to go over less than half of this, and then tomorrow in day 3, we're going to go over the other half. Okay. So the complete ACT grammar and punctuation rules is from the Critical Reader. I just found this online, read through it, and thought it was really good, so I decided to use it. After I read through it, I thought to myself, there's not a more comprehensive, list of grammar and punctuation rules you'll be tested on. So let's go ahead and look at this. Let's talk about punctuation first. Because punctuation is often, tested on the ACT. A lot of times, probably in 75 questions, you'll see 20 to 30 of them that are underlining, either the ends of sentences or, a comma, So punctuation is extremely important. And first of all, we'll talk about apostrophes. So apostrophes make nouns possessive. For singular nouns, they always add an apostrophe S, right? The boy's ball, the dress's buttons. For plural nouns, always add S and apostrophe, right? Never confuse this. So you have the boy's ball or the boy's ball, right? This means, this ball belongs to one boy, right? Whereas this means this ball belongs to many boys, right? And I might post this annotated, depending on how many annotations I do, or how many are important enough for me to mark. So just know that these apostrophes are very important for possessive nouns because, if you have it after an S, that means it's many, and whereas before an S is singular. So pronouns. Well, let's talk a bit about apostrophes and pronouns. No apostrophe is possessive with pronouns. And this is interesting because we just talked about apostrophes make nouns possessive, but since pronouns obviously have a lot of, these abbreviations that we see, like it's and there, and there, right? So no apostrophe is possessive with pronouns, right? You'll see that IT apostrophe S is not possessive, right? IT apostrophe S is an abbreviation for it is, whereas it's without an apostrophe is a possessive form of it, right? So this is really confusing, but you have to know. London is a city known for its many tourist attractions. So notice that you have to use this version right here. This is wrong, right? So know that. And then, of course, there's another pair here in which IT apostrophe S is wrong. Is right, I'm sorry. In fact, it is among the most visited cities in the world. And we could definitely attach that at the end of this one, but they were just trying to separate them. So, and then we're talking about there, and there. Here's another pair of commonly misused words. So, they apostrophe RE is, an abbreviation for they are. And the possessive one is THEIR. And you might think, well, we just said no apostrophe is possessive. Does that mean THERE is also possessive? No. This just means there's one of these that's possessive, and as a general principle, it's usually the one without an apostrophe. So just memorize those pairs right there. Let's talk about THEY apostrophe RE right here. So, correct. Correct is, correct, as London and Paris are two of the most famous cities in Europe, and they are known for having many tourist attractions. London and Paris are known for their many tourist attractions. This one's possessive, right? And then in the 19th century, Paris was considered the capital of the art world because so many famous painters lived and worked there. So this is the location indicator, right? Okay. So whose versus whose. Another example. So who apostrophe S is who is, whereas whose, WHOSE, remember the E there. Not all the words have E's, or most of them, all of them don't have E's. Only whose does. So whose is possessive of whose. So remember that one's the one without the apostrophe. Well, we won't go over that too specifically right there. You can look at it yourself if you're interested, or if you're still confused. Let's look at semicolons and periods. So a semicolon equals a period, is what it means here, is what it says here, right? So you always see a semicolon used in the same way as a period. The only difference is if you use a semicolon, it's still classified in the same sentence. If you use a period, it is not classified in the same sentence, like when you're numbering sentences. So in any other sense, they are equal. They have equal effects. They perform equal tasks. Same thing in every sentence. So semicolons are used between two complete sentences and before conjunctive adverbs when they're used to begin a clause. So, and examples are, London is an old city. Independent, right? This is independent. It has many new buildings. This is also independent, right? But then you have, before conjunctive adverbs, and you can see however, moreover, and therefore. These all come before dependent clauses. London is an old city. However, it has many new buildings. So, this doesn't have to be, a dependent clause. If there is a dependent clause after this, usually you have a comma instead of a semicolon. But when you have a semicolon with a conjunctive adverb, or as they normally call a subordinate a subordinate conjunction, you can see that it can be two independent clauses again here. Like I said, this usually, comes before a dependent clause, but when it has a semicolon, it comes before an independent clause. Same thing there. So note ACT grammar questions testing, however, will use a semicolon in the correct version, whereas rhetoric questions will use a period. So in the correct version, this is obviously an expert. This Erica Meltzer from the Critical Reader is an expert, probably more of an expert than I am at this. But ACT grammar questions testing, however, will use a semicolon in the correct version, whereas rhetoric questions will use a period. Just know that. So let's look at commas. Where should commas be used? Well, commas should be used before a coordinating conjunction to join two full sentences and an independent clauses, right? Two independent clauses. So your fanboys, right? For and, nor, but, or, yet, so, right? So just know those. And you need to know that, between two independent clauses, you'll see, a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Remember, coordinating conjunctions are only the fanboys. Then you have subordinating conjunctions later. So for and, nor, but, or, yet, so, here's an example. London is a very old city, comma, but, I'm going to put CC for a coordinating conjunction. But some parts of it are extremely modern. Okay. Between a dependent clause and an independent clause, when the dependent clause comes first, is another place commas should be used. So, like if you have a subordinating conjunction there, you can put dependent clause, comma, and then comma, of course, the independent clause, right? So you'll use a comma between a dependent and independent when the dependent comes first. If you look here, because London is a very old city, comma, remember your subordinating conjunction, I'll put SC here for subordinating conjunction, will come here, and you'll see the comma coming right here without a conjunction. So that's only when the dependent comes first, and the dependent already has a subordinating conjunction. 3, around non-essential words and... Oh, I'm sorry, you couldn't see that. Now you see that. Sorry. Around non-essential words and phrases. A non-essential clause is simply a clause that can be removed from a sentence. So this is appositives, right? So remember when I said in the complete grammar rules right here that you saw the appositive phrases down here, right? You see this 2 commas equals 2 dashes equals 2 parentheses, right? So an appositive phrase can be surrounded by commas, dashes, or parentheses. And commas, of course, is one of them. So that's what number 3 is right here. Let's look at number 4 here. Well, first of all, let's give an example for number 3. So here's the correct version right here. London, which is a very old city, has some extremely modern parts. So notice that I could literally take which is a very old city out and still have, a working sentence. You could say London has some extremely modern parts. That's fine too. But this is an interruption right here to the flow of ideas in the sentence. It's just to give some extra information. It's not wrong. It's just to give some extra information. So that is a positive phrase. Okay. So let's look at, of course the same goes for single words. Like if you have an appositive word right there. Like it does, however, have some very modern parts. You could say just it does have some very modern parts, but however adds another level of meaning to that. That's also not positive. Positives are always unnecessary. Remember that. Okay. Let's go on. Commas are also used to separate items in a list. You'll see, of course, that's the obvious one. Hiking, skiing, and whitewater rafting have always been some of my favorite activities. Of course, this comma right here before the and is called the Oxford comma. Notice you have no Oxford comma right here, right? And I've always been, a big... I've always loved using the Oxford comma. I've been a big proponent of the Oxford comma, but... you don't have to use it, right? When you're writing an essay, you can not use it, right? And on the ACT, sometimes they won't use it, and they'll count it as correct. However, most of the time, they still do use the Oxford comma in the ACT. Sorry, I, again, didn't scoot that up enough. Since I blew this up, I don't really know where my screen is anymore. 5, to separate adjectives whose order could be reversed, right? So the groaning, rumbling train finally pulled into the station. So these two are both right? Because they just reverse the two words. As long as they are adjectives, you separate adjectives from each other when they're describing the same, noun right here. You separate them with a comma. You don't separate the adjectives and the noun. You see there's no comma right there, right? So you don't separate... So no comma right here. You don't separate the adjective list from the noun with a comma. That doesn't work that way. Now, places where commas should not be used. Where are these places? So between two full sentences. London is a very old city. Some of its parts are extremely modern. This is called a comma splice, right? And it's wrong because you cannot use it between two independent clauses without a fanboy. And we talked about that earlier. And notice I'm going pretty fast through this. I just want to get through it so that we don't spend, hours here. Because this is a long list of grammar rules. Between an independent clause and a dependent clause, when the independent clause comes first. Well, so you do not use a comma when the independent clause comes first. When the dependent clause comes first, you do use a comma. But when the independent clause comes first, you just simply use a subordinating conjunction without a comma. You'll see there's no comma right here, right, in the correct version. So when the independent clause, of course, comes first, you can just follow it by a subordinating conjunction and then a dependent clause. 3, between two clauses with the same subject, when the subject is not repeated. So you have, the repeated subject here. London is a very old city, but it has many modern buildings. When you don't repeat the subject, because the subject is inferred as it here, because it is, descriptive of London right here, right? So, when you don't state it again, like you see there's no it right here, right? There's no subject right here, right? There's no subject. So, you always use a comma when there's a subject, but you never use a comma when the subject is not restated, because the subject doesn't have to be restated. Why does the subject not have to be restated? Well, if you're talking about London already, you can just say London is a very old city but has many modern buildings, right? So that's the correct version right there. You never put a comma in there when it doesn't have a subject. As you can see, this is the incorrect version. Between subjects and verbs, well, this holds true even when the subject's very long, okay? So, you never put commas between subject and verbs, even when, you have a compound subject or you have a huge long noun phrase or, an adverb adjective phrase as a subject, right? So European cities such as London and Paris, that's a noun phrase right there, right? So you'll see that's a noun phrase right there. And you will also see that you don't put a comma there, right? So the correct version doesn't have a comma there because, of course, the noun and the verb are meant to be together. It's like how I like to think about it. And you don't separate them by a comma because that disrupts the flow of the sentence, no matter how long the subject is. In compound subjects and compound objects, you never put commas. So you'll notice right here that many tourists visit London and Paris to visit museums. Oh, see, they put the correct version here and forgot to delete this comma right here. There's not supposed to be a comma right there in the correct version. Many tourists visit London and Paris to visit museums and monuments. In a compound subject or a compound object, in this case it's a compound object, you never put a comma in between two elements of it. Even if the and there is just there for a reason. You never, put comma there if there's only two elements there. So museums and monuments are just, one. They're also meant to be together. They're one subject or one object there. Before or after a preposition, you never put a comma. So incorrect here is, they forgot to delete this again, didn't they? I don't know what's happening. They forgot to delete a lot of stuff. So the correct version here is Frida Kahlo is among the most famous artists of Latin American origin. So of Latin American origin is kind of, our prepositional phrase, right? So if this is our prepositional phrase, we should know never to put a comma before it because the prepositional phrase, is describing this artist right here. But, it's, one with the word artist. It's not supposed to be separated like that. Before or after the word that, I finally saw the movie that my friends had recommended. As a general principle, you put a comma where you should pause. You wouldn't say something like, I finally saw the movie that my friends had recommended. That's not how you speak. I finally saw the movie that my friends had recommended. You don't say that, right? You always put a comma where you would pause or where you would, kind of pause your mind to think throughout a sentence. So that never has a comma before or after it. And these are really specific principles right here. We're almost done with this video. There's just a little bit. You notice where I marked the line there. We'll start with colons next time. So, and you never put in clauses which that is optional and does not appear. You never put a comma either. So, you'll see here that this is the subject, direct object, and of course, verb and direct object. That's really long, right? So, you never separate a verb from a direct object with a comma either. So, you'll see here that he said that he would come to the movie tonight, right? That is inferred. You can take that out. He said he would come to the movie tonight. You will never put a comma there if that was inserted. You just take the that out and leave nothing there. Between two adjectives whose order cannot be reversed, right? Okay, so stunning coral reefs. Well, obviously stunning and coral both describe reefs, but coral reefs is kind of, one description, one thing, right? It's a thing. And I have to describe it as a thing, even though a lot of dignified people don't like the, excuse me, the word thing. But, you have to describe coral reefs as a thing. And you don't, you can't say coral stunning reefs because there's no such thing as stunning reefs, right? What are stunning reefs, right? They're coral reefs. It's just, it is an entity, right? Coral is not just describing reefs, it is a type of reef, right? That's how I like to describe it. So you don't put a comma between those two adjectives whose order cannot be reversed. Even if they're adjectives, if you view this right here as a thing or as an entity by itself, then you don't put a comma there. Stunning coral reefs. Between adjectives and nouns here. So what's incorrect is, putting a comma between, even a list of adjectives and the noun. Remember when I said earlier, it's correct to put commas between lists of adjectives that can be reversed. But you cannot, continue that list if you put a comma right before the noun that it's describing. So you could say, stunning, amazing, beautiful coral reefs, right? But you cannot say stunning, amazing, beautiful, comma, reefs, right? Though that's not a list. The list is the list of adjectives. The noun is not a part of that list. So that's the list that you separate with commas, and then the noun that you don't separate with a comma, right? So this is, you can put something like stunning, amazing, and then beautiful, and you'll see that, and then you just put reefs. There's no comma there, right? You'll notice there's no comma right there because that is not a part. Reefs is not a part of your list of adjectives right there. Okay. Before an open parentheses, you never put a comma. So an open parentheses is already by itself a way to designate in a positive phrase. Sorry, you couldn't see what I was writing on this side. Stunning, amazing, beautiful reefs with no comma between these two. Okay, so parentheses indicate a positive phrase by themselves. They don't need another comma there. So, which are homes to thousands of species of marine life. You'll notice, why is there a comma afterwards? Well, it's because this comma is to indicate the separation of two clauses, not to indicate the end of the appositive phrase. There's a difference there. And the reason why they're using parentheses is, if you were using commas to separate this appositive phrase, you'd kind of need two commas there, or you just put one and then confuse the meaning of the sentence. So that's not good. That's why they use parentheses. So you never use a comma to start the parentheses, because the parentheses itself acts like a comma at the starting position within a positive phrase. So that brings us to the end of strategy lesson 1. Again, we'll go on in strategy lesson 2 to the rest of our, interesting, grammar rules on the ACT. But you'll notice I'm going pretty fast on this because we want to get through as many grammatical rules as we can in a short period of time, because you all can go back and watch this video, right? And I don't want to spend too much time in going over it a single time, because you all can pause it and rewatch it. And it's really good to rewatch videos because you can kind of hear what I have to say one more time. And I will scan this with annotations and put it on, because I did quite a few annotations, but I will scan this with annotations, put it right below the video on the web page. And with a lot of grammar rules, obviously comes a lot of memorization. And I hope that you can spend a bit more time getting familiar with the questions, because a lot of these they just come naturally when you read a question and you say, well, there's obviously not supposed to be a comma there. Like, it comes naturally because English is our native language, and even if it's not our native language, if you do enough problems and you speak the English language and read enough articles, then it will become kind of natural to know where a comma should be and where it shouldn't be. So it shouldn't be way too hard of a struggle. I'm just going over all of these specific rules so that if you're ever confused on a question, you can come back to this packet or to the video and look over the principle that is regarding that question, right? So that is why I'm going over all of the principles right there. So I hope you all learned a lot today, and if you have any questions, contact me at the email you can find on the main page of Joiner English. I'm, of course, your ACT tutor for Miss Joiner, and I've been doing this for quite a few years, so I have a bit of experience with this. most definitely, if you all are having trouble, rewatch the video, go back and review your diagnostic test. Even if you're after the practice test, you're having problems, again, come back and watch the videos as well. So I hope you all stay safe and healthy, and have a great day. Thank you.